April 11th, 1865. The Civil War was almost over. The Union had won. 800,000 Americans were dead. And the President of the United States was about to tell his closest friend about a dream that would haunt American history forever. To understand what happened on the night of April 11th, you first need to understand the world Abraham Lincoln was living in. It was 1865. America had been tearing itself apart for 4 brutal years. The Civil War, the bloodiest conflict in American history, had claimed more American lives than World War I and World War II combined. Over 800,000 soldiers dead. Entire cities burned to the ground. Families split permanently down the middle. Brother against brother, father against son. Abraham Lincoln had carried the full weight of all of it. He had aged dramatically in office. Photographs taken just 4 years apart show a man who looks as though 20 years had passed. Deep lines cut across his face. His eyes, once described by people who met him as warm and alive, had taken on a permanent, exhausted gravity. He was 56 years old. He looked 70. But in April 1865, finally, the end was in sight. Confederate General Robert E. Lee was days away from surrender. The war Lincoln had fought to preserve the Union and end slavery was almost won. And on the night of April 11th, Abraham Lincoln should have been sleeping soundly for the first time in 4 years. Instead, he was telling his bodyguard about a dream about a body in the East Room of the White House. What Lincoln described that night, in precise, specific, verifiable detail, would match the circumstances of his own death almost exactly. 3 days later. This is not myth. This is not legend. This is not speculation. Every detail of this story is documented in Ward Hill Lamon's memoir, published 30 years after the events, based on contemporaneous notes Lamon took at the time. It is one of the most thoroughly verified and deeply unsettling accounts in the entire history of the American presidency. This is the story of what Abraham Lincoln saw and what happened when he saw it. Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, in a one-room log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky. His family was desperately poor. His mother Nancy died when he was just 9 years old. Lincoln had almost no formal education. Because in total, by his own estimate, he received less than 12 months of actual schooling across his entire childhood. He taught himself to read by firelight. He walked miles to borrow books. He read and reread the Bible, Aesop's fables, and every document he could find until the words were part of him. As a young man, he worked as a store clerk, a postmaster, a surveyor, a rail splitter, whatever work he could find. But even then, people noticed something about Abraham Lincoln. He could hold a room. When he spoke, people listened. And when he argued, people struggled to beat him. He taught himself law from borrowed books. He passed the Illinois bar in 1836 at the age of 27. Abraham Lincoln, born in poverty, motherless at 9, self-educated by firelight, was now a lawyer. And it was the beginning of one of the most extraordinary rises in American political history. Lincoln entered politics through the Illinois state legislature in 1834. He served 4 terms and built a reputation as a gifted debater, precise, logical, surprisingly funny, and absolutely relentless in argument. In 1858, he ran for the United States Senate against Stephen A. Douglas, one of the most famous politicians in America. Lincoln lost the Senate race, but the Lincoln-Douglas debates, 7 public confrontations broadcast across the country in newspaper transcripts, made Abraham Lincoln a national figure. His position was clear and unambiguous. He believed slavery was morally wrong. He believed the United States could not survive permanently half slave and half free, and he said so, plainly, publicly, repeatedly, at a time when such statements could end a political career. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected the 16th President of the United States. He had never held federal office before. He had lost his only previous Senate race, and within weeks of his election, 7 Southern states had left the Union. The Civil War was coming. The Civil War began on April 12, 1861, when Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. What followed was 4 years of industrial-scale killing, unlike anything America had ever seen. Lincoln directed the war effort from the White House, working 18-hour days, making decisions that sent hundreds of thousands of men to their deaths, and carrying the political and moral weight of a nation fracturing at its foundation. And he was under constant pressure from every direction. Radical Republicans thought he wasn't moving fast enough on abolition. Conservative Democrats thought he had gone too far. His generals repeatedly failed him, McClellan, Burnside, Hooker, one disaster after another, until he finally found Ulysses S. Grant. And through all of it, Lincoln received death threats, thousands of them. His secretary, John Hay, maintained a file of threatening letters so large that Lincoln eventually stopped reading them. He called the file his sad collection. Lincoln's bodyguard, Ward Hill Lamon, a physically imposing lawyer and close personal friend from Illinois, was so worried about Lincoln's safety that he reportedly slept outside the president's bedroom door on multiple occasions, armed with pistols and a Bowie knife. And Lincoln himself appeared largely unbothered by the threats. He told Lamon more than once that if someone truly wanted to kill him, there was very little that could be done to stop it. He seemed to have made a kind of peace with the idea. What he had not made peace with was the dream. It was April 11th, 1865. 3 days earlier, on April 9th, Confederate General Robert E. Lee had surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. The Civil War was effectively over. Washington, D.C. was celebrating. Crowds filled the streets. Bands played. Cannons fired salutes. People wept with relief in broad daylight. That evening, Lincoln appeared at a White House window to address the jubilant crowd below. It was one of his last public speeches. But later that same night, away from the celebrations, and away from the crowds, Lincoln sat with Ward Hill Lamon in the quieter part of the White House, and he told him about the dream. Lincoln told Lamon he had been troubled by a dream for several nights. In the dream, he was alone in the White House. The building was unnaturally silent. No staff, no guards, no visitors, just Lincoln, walking through room after room, following the sound of quiet, distant sobbing. He said the sound was muffled and indistinct, like someone trying not to be heard. He moved through the staterooms, the corridors, the parlors, each room empty, each room dark, until he reached the East Room. The East Room, the grandest ceremonial space in the White House, was used for the most solemn occasions of the presidency: state dinners, formal receptions, and presidential funerals. In the dream, Lincoln pushed open the East Room doors. Inside, the room was arranged for a funeral. A raised platform, called a catafalque, stood at the center of the room. On it lay a body, draped entirely in black funeral cloth. Soldiers stood guard on either side. A crowd of mourners in black dress wept quietly around the platform. Lincoln moved through the crowd. He said no one looked at him. No one acknowledged him. As though he wasn't there. He approached a soldier standing guard and asked, "Who is dead in the White House?" The soldier turned to him and said, "The president. He was killed by an assassin." Lincoln said the sound of grief that erupted from the crowd in that moment woke him from the dream. He lay awake for the rest of the night, unable to sleep, and unable to stop thinking about what he had seen. Ward Hill Lamon was deeply shaken by what Lincoln told him. He begged Lincoln to take extra precautions, to cancel public appearances, to let him station more guards. Lincoln, characteristically, deflected with humor. He told Lamon the dream was probably nothing, that it wasn't even his own body in the dream, that the soldier had never specified it was him. Lamon didn't believe him. He later wrote that Lincoln's attempt to explain away the dream was unconvincing. that Lincoln himself clearly did not believe his own reassurances. Lamon wrote, and this is a direct account from his memoir, that Lincoln was visibly disturbed, that he spoke about the dream with a gravity and a weight that went beyond ordinary nightmare, that he seemed, on some level, to already know. 3 days later, Ward Hill Lamon was out of Washington on a trip Lincoln had personally assigned him. He would later say it was the greatest regret of his life that he wasn't there. On the night of April 14th, John Wilkes Booth was 26 years old in April 1865. He was one of the most famous actors in America, handsome, charismatic, electrifying on stage. His father, Junius Brutus Booth, was a legendary Shakespearean actor. His brother, Edwin Booth, would become one of the greatest American actors of the 19th century. John Wilkes Booth had fame. He had money. He had a career that virtually any young man in America would have envied. And he threw all of it away. Booth was a fanatical Confederate sympathizer, despite never having served in the Confederate Army, and he had watched the South lose the Civil War with escalating fury. He hated Lincoln with an intensity that bordered on obsession. In the months leading up to April 1865, Booth had assembled a small conspiracy. The original plan was not assassination, it was kidnapping. Booth planned to abduct Lincoln, hold him hostage, and use him as leverage to force the release of Confederate prisoners of war. The kidnapping attempts failed.
Come on, faster.
Lincoln's schedule changed at the last moment on multiple occasions. As Confederate defeat became inevitable, Booth's plan changed. If he could not save the Confederacy, he would punish the Union. He would kill Abraham Lincoln. And simultaneously, on the same night, he would have Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William Seward killed as well. A coordinated three-pronged attack designed to decapitate the Union government in a single night. Booth's co-conspirators were a small, unstable group of Confederate sympathizers. Lewis Powell, a former Confederate soldier, was assigned to kill Secretary of State William Seward at his home. George Atzerodt, a carriage painter, was assigned to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson at his hotel. David Harold would assist Powell and help guide Booth's escape through southern Maryland. Mary Surratt, the owner of a Washington boarding house where the conspirators met, would later become the first woman executed by the United States federal government for her role in the plot. The operation was set for the night of April 14, 1865, Good Friday. Booth learned that Lincoln would be attending a performance of the comedy Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater that evening. He knew Ford's Theater intimately. He had performed there many times. He knew the layout. He knew the staff. He knew exactly which box Lincoln would occupy. He spent the morning of April 14th preparing. At some point that morning, he carved a small peephole in the door of the presidential box, through which he would confirm Lincoln's exact position before entering. The trap was set. April 14, 1865, began as a good day for Abraham Lincoln. He told his cabinet at their morning meeting that he expected very good news from the front very soon. He said he knew this because he had dreamed the previous night of sailing on a vast dark ocean toward a distant shore.
It awaits us.
He said he had experienced this same dream before every major Union victory of the war. He took it as a good omen. Lincoln spent the afternoon in meetings and received visitors. That evening, despite fatigue and despite repeated suggestions from staff that he could cancel, Lincoln decided to attend Ford's Theater. He had promised. He didn't like to break his word. And there was another reason. The newspapers had announced that Lincoln would be attending. He didn't want to disappoint the public. Mary Todd Lincoln later recalled that her husband seemed unusually quiet and reflective that afternoon. Not sad, just still, as though he was somewhere else in his mind. At approximately 8 p.m., Abraham and Mary Todd Lincoln departed the White House for Ford's Theater, where Ward Hill Lamon, his most trusted protector, was in Richmond, Virginia. On an errand Lincoln himself had sent him on. Ford's Theater on 10th Street in Washington, D.C. was packed that night. Over 1,000 people filled the seats. When Lincoln arrived, late at approximately 8:30 p.m., the orchestra struck up "Hail to the Chief," and the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Lincoln acknowledged the crowd with a smile and a bow, then settled into his chair in the presidential box. The box was draped with American flags and a portrait of George Washington. Lincoln sat in a rocking chair, specifically brought from the White House for his comfort. His bodyguard for the evening was a Washington Metropolitan Police officer named John Frederick Parker. Parker, whose record included multiple disciplinary infractions, was not Ward Hill Lamon. At some point during the performance, Parker left his post outside the presidential box door. He went to watch the play, possibly, according to some accounts, to get a drink at a nearby saloon. The door to the presidential box was left unguarded. John Wilkes Booth arrived at Ford's Theater at approximately 10 p.m. He was well known to the staff. No one questioned him. He made his way to the dress circle, the upper level, and worked his way toward the presidential box. At the door, he found it unguarded. He looked through the small peephole he had carved that morning. He could see Lincoln, sitting in the rocking chair, relaxed, leaning slightly forward, watching the stage below. The Booth waited for a specific moment in the play, a line he knew would get a big laugh from the audience, a moment when the noise would cover the sound of a gunshot. At approximately 10:15 p.m., the line was delivered. The audience laughed. Booth opened the door, stepped into the presidential box, raised a single-shot .44 caliber Derringer pistol, and fired. The bullet entered the back of Lincoln's head, behind his left ear. Lincoln slumped forward in the rocking chair. He never regained consciousness. Booth leapt from the presidential box to the stage, approximately 12 feet below. His spur caught on the bunting draped from the box. He landed hard, fracturing a small bone in his left leg. He turned to the screaming audience and shouted, in Latin, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants, and the state motto of Virginia. Then he ran. In the presidential box, Mary Todd Lincoln was screaming. A young Army officer named Henry Rathbone, who had been sitting with the Lincolns, had been stabbed by Booth during the struggle and was bleeding heavily. A doctor in the audience, Charles Leal, was the first medical professional to reach Lincoln. He was 23 years old. He immediately recognized that the wound was fatal. Lincoln was carried across the street to the Peterson House, a boarding house directly opposite Ford's Theater. He was laid on a bed in a rear ground floor room. The bed was too short for his 6'4" frame. He was placed diagonally, and there, surrounded by cabinet members, doctors, and his weeping wife, Abraham Lincoln fought through the night. Lincoln's death. Abraham Lincoln died at 7:22 a.m. on the morning of April 15, 1865. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, standing at his bedside, said words that have echoed through American history ever since, "Now he belongs to the ages." Lincoln's body was transported back to the White House. It was prepared and placed on a raised platform, a catafalque, draped in black funeral cloth. Soldiers stood guard on either side. Mourners filed past in silence, in the East Room, exactly, precisely, as Abraham Lincoln had dreamed it. Every detail, the platform, the soldiers, the mourners, the room, all of it, as he had described to Ward Hill Lamon 4 days earlier. John Wilkes Booth fled Washington with David Harold. He was hunted for 12 days through Maryland and Virginia. On April 26, 1865, Union soldiers surrounded a tobacco barn on the Garrett Farm in Virginia where Booth was hiding. Harold surrendered. Booth refused. The barn was set on fire. Booth was shot, either by Sergeant Boston Corbett or possibly by his own hand, through a gap in the barn boards. He was dragged out and died on the porch of the farmhouse as dawn broke. His last words were reported as, "Useless, useless." Lewis Powell, who had stabbed Secretary Seward nearly to death but failed to kill him, was captured. George Atzerodt, who lost his nerve and never approached Vice President Johnson, was captured. Along with Mary Surratt, David Harold, and others, they were tried by military tribunal. 4 were hanged on July 7, 1865, including Mary Surratt, the first woman executed by the United States federal government. And Ward Hill Lamon learned of the assassination while he was still in Richmond. By the time he returned to Washington, Lincoln was already dead. Lamon never forgave himself. For the rest of his life, he carried the weight of that night. He had been the one person Lincoln trusted most to keep him safe, and he had not been there. On an errand Lincoln himself had sent him on. In his 1895 memoir, 30 years after the assassination, Lamon wrote about the dream in precise detail. He described Lincoln's expression as he told it, the weight in his voice, the way he sat. He wrote that Lincoln, despite his attempts to rationalize the dream away, was clearly and deeply disturbed by it. Lamon believed a Sakibat and stated plainly in his memoir that Abraham Lincoln knew, not with certainty, but with the deep instinctive knowledge of a man who has looked at something true and cannot unsee it. He saw it coming, and still, he went to the theater. The legacy Abraham Lincoln is consistently ranked by historians as the greatest American president. He preserved the Union. He ended slavery. He guided America through its darkest chapter with a combination of political genius, moral clarity, and almost superhuman endurance. He did all of this while receiving more death threats than any president before him, while watching men die by the hundreds of thousands in his name, while burying his own son Willie, who died in the White House in 1862 at the age of 11, and while carrying, for the last weeks of his life, the image of a body in the East Room. A body he had described to the man who was supposed to protect him. 4 days before it was his own. History does not always give us clean answers. We cannot know what Lincoln truly believed about that dream. We cannot know whether, on some level, he understood what was coming and chose to face it anyway. What we know is what Ward Hill Lamon recorded. What we know is what happened 4 days later. What we know is that the East Room, the soldiers, the mourners, the catafalque, were exactly as he had described them. Make of that what you will.
If this story moved you, subscribe for more forgotten history. Every week, the stories they didn't teach you in school. If this story moved you, subscribe for more forgotten history.